You know that feeling when you're lying in bed at 2 a.m. and a memory hits you so hard it knocks the air out of your chest? Not a happy memory. Not a bad one either. Just one that never got finished. That's what this story is about. The Regret Line follows Amara Reyes, a late-night radio host in Seoul who built her entire career out of other people's confessions. Every night she sits behind that microphone, takes calls from strangers brave enough to admit what they did wrong, and tells them exactly what they don't want to hear. She's sharp, she's composed, and she's very, very good at her job. The problem with spending your nights listening to everyone else's unfinished stories is that eventually yours calls in too. This series is about the things we leave unsaid, the silences we convince ourselves were kind, the people we loved so deeply we thought disappearing would hurt them less than the truth. It won't always be comfortable. It won't always be clean, but it will be honest. Welcome to the Regret Line. This is episode 1, The Voice on the Line. Tonight, you meet Amara for the first time. You'll hear how she works, how she thinks, and exactly why she's so good at pulling the truth out of strangers. And then, right at the end of the night, a caller comes through who sounds just different enough to make her forget for just one moment that she's supposed to be the one asking the questions. Episode 1 starts now.
Rain tapped steadily against the studio windows, soft enough to sound calming, but loud enough to settle into every silence between conversations. Outside, Seoul glowed beneath the late-night haze. Red brake lights stretched across rain-slick streets like ribbons of light, weaving endlessly through the city below. Gold storefront signs reflected across puddles gathered along the sidewalks, flickering every time headlights passed through them. The storm softened everything it touched. Buildings blurred at the edges beneath the rain, turning the skyline beyond the glass into something distant and dreamlike. Inside the recording booth, the air carried the faint smell of coffee, warm electronics, and the exhaustion of another late night. Amara Reyes leaned back in her chair with one leg crossed over the other, absently spinning a pen between her fingers, while the caller on the line stumbled through the end of her confession. "And I know it sounds bad," the woman admitted weakly. I couldn't stand watching just as hard." Amara slowly lifted a brow. "So, your solution was to sabotage your best friend? When you say it like that, is there a prettier way to say it?" A muffled laugh came from behind the soundboard. Seoul quickly covered her mouth, shoulders shaking as she tried and failed to stop herself from laughing. The caller groaned loudly. "Okay, wow, you're brutal." "You called a late-night regret podcast," Amara replied smoothly. "Not a support group. That somehow makes me feel worse." "It should." A restrained smile ghosted Amara's lips, though the expression never fully settled on her face anymore. The caller laughed despite herself, sounding embarrassed now instead of defensive. "All right, fine. I deserved that." Amara spun the pen once between her fingers before lightly setting it against the desk. "You don't accidentally ruin someone's future," she said calmly. "That kind of betrayal takes intention." The muted silence on both ends carried her words. Beyond the booth, rain continued tapping softly against the windows. "Did you ever apologize?" "No." "Why not?" The woman hesitated before answering. "At first, I thought I would. Then too much time passed, and it just started feeling pointless." Amara's gaze drifted toward the rain, slowly sliding down the studio windows. People always say that. Her voice softened slightly, though not warmly. That. It's too late. The city lights reflected dimly in the glass beside her. Amara tapped the pen once against the desk. But usually, the person they hurt spends years wondering why it happened in the first place. A pause settled over the line. And explanations matter more than people realize. The silence that followed felt strangely heavy. Seo glanced up briefly from the monitor. Even after working together for years, moments like this still caught her off guard sometimes. There were nights Amara sounded distant while hosting the show. Nights where her responses felt detached, almost mechanical beneath the practiced charm of her radio voice. But then there were nights like this. Nights where something quieter slipped through. Something honest. The caller let out a nervous laugh. "You think she still remembers?" Amara's lips curved faintly. People remember the things that break them. Another silence settled between them. Then, "Well, that's horrifying." "Yes," Amara said quietly. "It is." Seo let out a quiet snort behind the soundboard. The tension eased after that. The caller apologized again before the segment wrapped naturally to a close. Amara thanked her for being honest, even if the honesty came years too late, and let the line disconnect while soft transition music filtered through the studio speakers. The sudden quiet inside the booth felt heavier after hours of voices filling the room. Seo leaned against the doorway with crossed arms. "You know," she said, "one day somebody's gonna report you for emotional terrorism." Amara scoffed softly. "They call me willingly." "Mm-hmm." Seo tilted her head. "You ever think maybe you enjoy psychologically damaging strangers a little too much? I think strangers enjoy making bad decisions and then asking me to validate them. That sounds suspiciously judgmental for someone whose entire career depends on those people calling in." Amara reached for her coffee. "It's called job security." She took a sip and immediately grimaced. "Cold. Disgusting," she muttered. Seo laughed softly. "You said that 30 minutes ago and still kept drinking it." Amara ignored her. "How many calls left?" Seo glanced toward the cue monitor. "1." Amara nodded once. "Put them through." Soft click echoed through her headphones. The music lowered. The on-air sign glowed red once more. Amara straightened slightly in her chair, her expression smoothing back into professional calm. "Welcome back to the regret line," she said smoothly into the microphone. "Looks like we have time for one final caller tonight." Silence answered her. Then, "I think I ruined the only good thing that ever happened to me." The voice landed differently than the others had. Low, measured, male, carrying the particular exhaustion of someone who had rehearsed this moment many times and still found it harder than expected. Amara's pen stilled between her fingers. "That's a heavy thing to carry," she said evenly. "How long have you been carrying it?" A pause. 5 years? "And what did you ruin?" Another pause, longer this time. "Someone who trusted me completely." Amara's expression held steady, her voice maintaining its practiced calm. Across the soundboard, Seo watched her without moving. What happened? I left, the caller said simply, without explaining why, without giving her a reason she could hold on to. Did she ask for one? She deserved one. His voice tightened slightly. That's different. Amara's gaze drifted briefly toward the rain on the windows. People who leave without explanations, she said carefully, usually tell themselves they're protecting someone. A beat of silence. Yes. And did it work? The caller went quiet for a long moment. No. Amara turned the pen slowly between her fingers. So you protected her from the truth, she said, and left her alone, with something worse. I didn't realize what she would think. His voice dropped lower. What she would believe about me. What did she believe? The silence stretched thin. That I cheated on her. Something shifted almost imperceptibly in Amara's posture. Her spine straightened by a fraction. Her fingers stopped moving entirely around the pen. COA noticed. She said nothing. And you didn't, Amara said. Her voice stayed level, professionally neutral. No. But you never told her that. No. The rain tapped softly against the glass. Amara's jaw held very still. There were things I should have told her a long time ago, the caller said quietly. I know that now. I knew it then too. I just convinced myself that the silence was kinder. Silence is never kinder, Amara said. It only leaves more room for the wrong conclusions. I understand that now. A pause opened between them. She was the kind of person who always found the right words, he continued quietly. Even in the hardest moments. Even when I couldn't. His voice softened. That's something she would have said. Amara said nothing for a moment. The studio felt very still around her. Did you love her? The question left her mouth before she fully decided to ask it. Professional. Controlled. The kind of question she asked callers every night. Yes. No hesitation. You loved her that much? More than I knew how to say at the time. COA looked up slowly from the monitor. Amara's expression remained composed on the surface. Underneath, something pulled tight and quiet behind her eyes. Then why? She stopped herself, rerouted. What do you want from telling this story tonight? The caller exhaled slowly. I don't know anymore. A pause. I just needed her to know that leaving destroyed me too. The rain slid down the glass in slow, uneven lines. Amara set the pen down gently against the desk. People who get left, she said carefully, rarely imagine that the person who left them is also suffering. They assume the leaving was easy. Her voice stayed even. They spend years believing they were the only one who paid the price. She paid more than I did, he said quietly. I know that. Yes, Amara said. She did. A long silence settled between them. I'm sorry, he said finally. Amara's throat moved slightly. You're telling the wrong person, she said softly, pain etching at the line disconnected. The on-AR sign dimmed. Soft transition music filled the studio. Amara sat very still in her chair for a moment longer than necessary. COA said nothing from behind the soundboard. She simply watched her friend stare at the rain on the windows with an expression too carefully blank to mean nothing at all. Amara reached for the cold coffee, set it back down without drinking it. Then she pulled off her headphones slowly, set them on the desk, and exhaled once through her nose. Good show tonight, she said quietly. Her voice carried none of its earlier edge. COA nodded once. Yeah, she said softly. It was. Neither of them said anything else. The rain kept falling outside. And somewhere in the city, a man sat alone in his car in a building's inner parking lot, hands gripping the steering wheel long after the broadcast had ended. Because for 5 years he had convinced himself that hating him would make it easier for her to move on. Hearing that single accusation made him realize just how wrong he had been. And for the first time in years, the silence around him no longer felt empty. It felt unbearable.